Nothing you see online tells the full story. This past year taught me that in a way I could not ignore anymore. I'm done letting social media and entrepreneurship be a highlight reel. I'm done pretending that the stages, the awards, the numbers, the results tell the full story or the truth about what life looks like behind the scenes. Because it doesn't. Over the past 12 months, I've started living with radical honesty and transparency in my personal life. And now I'm doing the same inside my business. When we pretend life is perfect, it helps no one, not others, and not yourself. It actually hurts. What is inspiring is seeing what it looks like to struggle and keep going anyway. To let our lives and our businesses exist in the same story without pretending that they're separate. That's where real connection happens. That's where the lessons are learned. And that's where courage spreads. This is my story. It isn't neat, it isn't tidy, and it definitely isn't clean. But it's real. Here it goes. In order to understand what happened in 2025, you need to know a little bit about what happened in 2024. So I actually recorded an entire podcast and video that does a recap of 2024. I'll link that in the description so you guys can check that out if you want to. But ultimately, 2024 was also a year of challenges, but totally different types of challenges. Earlier in the year, at the encouragement of a coach that I'd worked with for many years, he said, look, you have clients who want done-for-you agency services. We had phased out most of our done-for-you agency services in previous years when we shifted mainly to coaching and consulting as well as digital products, but the demand was still there. So he had someone that he also worked with as a private client that he encouraged me to go into a partnership with. This person was supposed to handle everything for the agency clients, do the account management, do all of the project management, some technical implementation, but I also had hired 2 team members to work directly for this person to support them. That was not a good decision whatsoever. So we signed a bunch of clients really quickly, and it became very apparent that this person was not cut out for the job. They couldn't keep up. It was causing a lot of issues, a lot of messes that I had to go back in and fix. Ultimately, the final straw is when I was having a call with a client on the way to the airport, going on my vacation to Jamaica, one of the few weeks of the year where this was supposed to be no work at all. And I was actually working on some of those things late at night on my vacation. I knew that that was not something that I should have stepped into. I let poor advice really impact several months out of the year. And really, that entire process took about 6 months out of 2024. I also ended up hiring a sales manager at my coach's encouragement as well, when really a sales manager wasn't what I needed. And even though this person was perfectly qualified on paper, he nor any of the closers that he brought with him could close deals. I spent a lot of money on appointments that they did not close, and ultimately it was a very bad financial decision. At the end of the day, I still had a really strong year in 2024 revenue wise, but I was completely depleted. I was doing so much of the high level work within my business. And then I was cleaning up the messes from these other people. So not only was it a financial hit, it was very much a time hit. And I was pretty stressed. This had been taking so much out of me time wise that I felt like I had no time for myself. I was not able to re energize. I was not able to do anything that would help me recharge and continue. So I was in a place where I was just looking for the right solution. I ended up going to speak on the Modern Profits Cruise in early November. One of the speakers had a business where they find, train, and place operators within businesses like mine. So I said, this is exactly what I need. Honestly, it's something I should have done long before. And I started the process with them to hire my first operator. So I had a pool of about 5 really qualified people. I was told to just select based on who I vibed with the best. They've all been vetted. Every single one of them could do an amazing job. And at the end of October, after speaking at Level Up, I had an amazing idea for an AI-based sales and marketing software solution that I was really excited about. This was the thing that I really wanted to make 2025 the focus of. So the operator I ended up selecting had a strong background in developing and launching softwares. I thought he was going to be the right fit for it. So this was at the very end of 2024. He started really going through all the documentation at the very end of the year and was officially brought on board at the beginning of January. So I thought this was going to be something that totally changed what my year looked like. It was going to take away a lot of hours from me. It was going to take away a lot of stress from me, and it would allow me to do what I did best, which is really innovate, build creative, effective solutions, coach to the best of my abilities, and ultimately launch this new software project. So, as I begin in 2025, on a personal level, I'm really spread very thin. As I mentioned, I hadn't had any time to take care of myself. I have two kids. At the time, I had an 8-year-old and a 2-year-old. And I was spending all of my time outside of working hours parenting. I was doing pretty much everything on the home front, and I was just really getting to the end of my rope. I hadn't spent time with my friends in a while. I hadn't done anything fun, anything for myself. And I was really, really praying that that was going to change soon. I had dealt with a lot over the past several years within my marriage. And ultimately, I am somebody who really commits when they commit. I did everything in my power to try and fight for my marriage, to communicate what I needed, but I felt like I was the only person fighting for it. So later in January, my grandmother passes away. And right as this happened, or right before this happened, things were at a very stressful point within my marriage. And I decided to take a few days and went to the funeral with my mom and my stepdad, just me, to try and get some space and clear my head. And I was so glad that I did. It was really, really great to connect with family that I hadn't seen in a while. Even though the circumstances were unfortunate and I was still dealing with a lot of things at the time, it was good to be able to have some time away. When I first decided to roll out Profits AI, I decided initially that hiring somebody internal to build it out was going to be the best way to go. There was a lot of intellectual property. I wanted to be able to control the timelines, make sure that I could oversee everything being done. The first person I hired looked promising. It looked like they had the right skill set to be able to do this. But after bringing him on board, it became clear pretty quickly that he lacked the critical thinking and problem solving skills that a project of this scope was going to require. So after that, I tried to figure out, okay, should we just try and do as much as we can internally with the existing team that I have, and then contract out some other pieces that maybe my team isn't as experienced with? So I thought this was going to be a good way to go. However, we had a lot of other things on our plate. We had the events, we had client projects, we had our existing systems that we were rebuilding. And so we did not have huge bandwidth for this. So I made a post on social media and I said, hey, if you know any really highly qualified automations builders, let me know. So I got two referrals from someone who is pretty well known and respected in the high level community, because a lot of these things were going to relate to the high level platform. He said, these are the only two people that I would ever hire to work with as contractors. So I trusted this person's recommendation and I decided to go ahead, reach out to both of them. We set up calls, we did all the project scope. They said that they were ready to go, everything was good. So the first person, I wired them $5,000 to go ahead and get started. And then progress was not made. I kept checking in, trying to get updates. I wasn't seeing anything moving on my end. And I was met with silence, then more silence, then maybe an update on, hey, I've had a lot of personal things going on in my life, which ultimately I understood. But at the same time, when someone pays you, you should do the job. Even if delays arise, which as business owners, we all know that they do, you should stand behind what you promised to do, or you should refund their money. Ultimately, none of those things were happening. The second person was able to, go ahead and get started without the initial wire transfer, which was great because she never did anything either. So the person who referred them, I reached out and said, hey, this project is not moving as quickly as I want or need it to. Are you available to help work on this? Is this something that I can pay you to do? He said, yeah, sure. Let me kind of QB the whole thing. Like, I'll see where they are on their projects. I'll go ahead and get you a final timeline and we'll get started. I can start in the next week. So I was really excited about that. Ultimately, I checked back in. We had a couple calls. I said, okay, that's great, but can you give me a timeline and can you give me a quote on what it's going to cost for you to do this? I checked back in multiple times and this person also completely ghosted me. So I was out $5,000 that I had paid to this first person. The person who referred me, who works closely with them, had no desire to try and encourage this person to complete what I had paid them for or do what they said they were going to do, which was incredibly frustrating, but also really shocking personally, because that is not the way that I do business. And so then I needed to figure out what I was going to do next. Over the summer, when everything was really, kind of going crazy in my personal life, I decided to hire another third party contractor. This is somebody that I had spoken with about the project right at the very beginning. And I thought he was very qualified and that he can definitely do it. But that's when I was very concerned about hiring a third party contractor for the exact reasons that I had just seen with the people I had hired recently. And that was timelines are out of your control. You can't oversee everything. Projects get pushed back. And I didn't want the completion of this project to be out of my hands. But at that time, I had no other option. We could not do it internally with everything that was going on. And so I met with this person again, went through the scope, and went ahead and hired him. I paid a very significant amount of money for this. It was supposed to be a 2-month project, and timelines have gotten pushed back consistently. So we're a little over 6 months right now. We should be wrapping it up this month. I am very hopeful and optimistic that we will get that done. And we should be launching this at the end of Q1. So really excited, but that has not been an easy feat as well. I was able to get a provisional patent filed for this design at the end of October, and I got the official patent filed this October. So this is a patent pending system. And if we can really make this work, it is truly going to change the way that businesses market and sell online. The truth is, innovation costs more time and money than people want to admit. But the truth is, if you have something that is worth building, you have to continue to try, no matter how many options fail. At the end of 2024, I had also joined a new mastermind. So as I had said, I had been in a mastermind and worked with one coach for about 4 years prior. Several of those situations that I dealt with in 2024 were really making me question if this was the right move and the right person to continue with. But I wasn't necessarily planning on changing who I worked with or joining another mastermind. I was at the Level Up Summit at the end of 2024, and there was a booth there for a pretty well-known mastermind. Someone that I really admire and know well ran this mastermind, and I was just there to chat with him, talk about different things, catch up. Through that conversation, he said, you should join the mastermind. And I said, well, I'm already in a mastermind. I'm not really looking to be in a second one. My time is already pretty tight as it is, and I'm just not really going to be able to participate. So I don't know. And the more we talked, the more he said, no, I think you really should join. You're a perfect fit for this. So I spoke with their operator, and she really convinced me to join. She said I was the hardest sale she had all day, which is very funny in retrospect. But I decided, what the heck, I'm going to go ahead and join. Maybe there are things I can get from this mastermind that I'm not getting from the mastermind I'm currently in. And so I went ahead and invested $30,000 to join this mastermind that I had no intention of joining when I started that day. So after I get back from that event, I'm excited to start diving in. This was at a time where, again, I was stressed about a lot of different things. I was kind of being spread thin in different areas. I had this new AI software that I was really passionate about that I wanted to prioritize, but I wanted to make sure I did this in the smartest possible way. So just being in a new mastermind, you don't necessarily know like all the communication channels and how everything works. So I sent a Slack message just kind of breaking down the whole situation, hoping to get some feedback on that. I didn't get any response back. So I posted in one of the Slack groups, hey, how do I go ahead and get feedback on things that I'm looking for help on? So I was encouraged to set some one-on-one calls, but I was told that there was something called a hot seat that you can do during the mastermind calls. And so I said, yeah, that sounds great. Now, when I logged into like my membership portal, I didn't really see very much in there. I couldn't find any information on how hot seats work or, any of the communication channels that I was looking for. And anytime I had a question, I would always be pointed back to this operator. But the problem was that the operator wasn't giving me any answers or any of the information that I needed. So I end up getting on my first call with the mastermind itself. And through that conversation, they said, hey, well, there's this event that is just for a handful of mastermind members. It's first come, first serve, where they basically break down your entire business over the course of 2 days and then like build it back up. So I said, this is exactly what I need right now. Sign me up. So on that call, I was like, yes, I'll be there. So this event was supposed to happen in early January and I was hyped. I thought this is going to be a turning point for sure. I can't wait to go. So as time went on, I never heard anything else about it. And it's the end of December. I'm trying to figure out travel and things like that. I have 2 kids, and so I can't just be away from them for a really long time. And there was also a mastermind event that they were having the following week for the whole mastermind, not just like a small handful like this previous event was going to be. So I had to choose between them because I couldn't go to both. So I chose to go to that first, smaller, more intimate event because that was really the help I needed at the time. So I didn't book anything for that mastermind event. And I was really disappointed because I had wanted to really immerse myself in this group. And so I kept checking like, hey, can I get information on the location? Like I need to book my travel. I need to book my airfare and my hotel. And I don't know exactly where in the state that is being held. Didn't get any information back on that. So finally we're into January. I'm still not able to get the info. And then I find out after I had posted in the Slack channel asking, hey, does anybody else have information on this, that it had been canceled. Nobody had reached out to let me know. And there would have only been like 8 to 10 people attending that event. So it's not like a large group. You would expect that they would make sure to get in touch with everyone. So I was frustrated because I had not booked for the mastermind event because of this event. It was something I was very much looking forward to. I had tried to sign up for a hot seat. I didn't know when during the call the hot seats were. I didn't know the format. I had asked for info, never got anything back. There was nothing in the portal about it. So I had a client call that ran a little bit long that day. I joined the call maybe 15 minutes after it began. And these are like large group calls. And apparently they happened at the very beginning of the call. So I missed my opportunity for that. And I just got attitude from this operator. It was really bizarre. I'd never done anything to her, but it was just, there was a lot of attitude for no real reason. When all I was trying to do was just get incorporated into the group, get familiar. But again, I had no guidance or direction on any of those things. So then after that event that I had to miss because I was unable to book because of this other event, I get an email from this random person saying, hey, I'm this operator's assistant. Can you give her a call? She's been trying to reach you. And I said, oh, well, I've seen no missed calls. She had my phone number. We exchanged numbers at the Level Up Summit. She has my email address. We're connected in the Slack channel. She hasn't reached out to me at all. So I'm like, what's going on here? And I said, yeah, I haven't seen anything, but tell her she can reach out to me, or like, is this still her number? Because this is the number I have, and this is the number she would call. Because she has my number. So anyway, it was really weird. And then I got a couple other messages. Then finally, I'm like, hey, can we get on a Zoom call? Because things were just feeling a little weird. And I like to be able to see people face to face. So this woman then proceeds to not call me at the time that we had agreed on and says, your membership has been canceled and we've refunded your money. And I said, what are you talking about? Like, what is going on here? And She said, "We don't feel like you're gonna make an ROI from the group," which is completely hysterical because I could quadruple my ROI from one tip that I pick up on one call or one event. And so I knew it was a completely fabricated excuse at the end of the day. And I had done absolutely nothing besides attend maybe 3 calls. I'd spoken on one of those calls, and it really felt personal, honestly. And I'd never been treated that way as a consumer buying something and somebody who also has a program similar to their program. I have my own mastermind. I would never ever treat someone that way, refuse to give them a valid explanation, and just say, we don't think you're going to ROI, especially when they're the ones that convinced me to join. So it seems super bizarre. So I reached out personally to the actual owners of the group, because this was not the owner and this is not someone that I knew previously before joining, and just told them, hey, like, this is what the situation has been. Can you just tell me what's going on? Because I have no idea. I never heard back from either one of them. So, still to this day, I have no idea what the issue was, but it was truly bizarre. And it really just showed me like, you don't know people until they show you who they are, essentially. So, I had stopped working with my previous coach at the beginning of 2025. I had decided with everything else, like, I'm starting fresh. I feel like it's time to move on or take a break. And so I now was in no mastermind whatsoever. I wasn't working with a coach for the first time really since I started my business. And then I saw a mastermind from somebody that I know really well, somebody that I trust, who definitely had the type of information that is what I would look for in a mastermind in particular, a lot of really advanced media buying, things like that. And so I decided to go ahead and join that mastermind. Ultimately, I've gotten value from it, but throughout the course of the year, I barely was able to participate. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get on many calls. I haven't been able to go to any of the events, which I really hate, because ultimately, it's a $30,000 investment for these masterminds, and you decide what you get from them. And even though I have not really taken advantage of everything, I do still appreciate the fact that they've been there for me when I need them. Hopefully this upcoming year, I'll be able to do my part as a mastermind member and get more value from that. But at the same time, sometimes personal things arise, and it would be completely ridiculous for me to ask them for a refund or to cancel when I signed up knowingly. I'm the one who had crazy personal circumstances and a lot of kind of chaos running in the business. And so it was on me to not be able to actually take full advantage. And that's something that, a lot of people I think don't always see it as their own responsibility. But being somebody who runs masterminds, who runs coaching programs, it's something that you, as the business owner, you make the choice and you decide what you do with it. And sometimes you make great use of those investments and sometimes you don't. So, moral of the story is take responsibility for your own choices and choose wisely when it comes to the groups that you're going to participate in, because unfortunately, some of them are really, really weird once you get behind the scenes. So, definitely a unique situation that happened early in the year. So, one of the things that my new operator was responsible for was to try and bring on a new closer. This is something we had needed since the previous year when the sales manager and his closers did not work out. So, I let him manage that hiring process. We have a really strong automated hiring funnel. I sent out a couple of emails and got dozens and dozens of applications back. He did multiple interviews. I did a final group interview. And finally, he decided on one specific person to bring on. This person looked great on paper. They had all the experience. They were apparently one of the top closers at the companies they'd worked with. And my operator said he verified that. Once he brought this person on, it was only days before he said that he was ready to take calls. Normally, someone would need a lot more time than a few days to go through all the details on our offers, on our call recordings, really understanding the product they were selling. But he said he was super experienced and he didn't need that much time. So the following week, we went ahead and filled up his calendar. He had 34 calls booked the first week. By the end of the week, we realized that he had no-showed to 17 of those calls. He had sent in multiple messages that were really unusual for someone's first week on the job, saying first that they had a snowstorm, then his wife was in the hospital. When we tried to follow up and say, hey, how are things going? Like, do you need to close your schedule so no one books with you? He wouldn't respond back to the following day. It was a very, very unusual behavior. Then finally, at the end of the week on Friday, he said, I don't think this is the right opportunity for me. Now, ultimately, I was frustrated because that was 17 calls that he had not shown up for that were scheduled with him that I had paid for. Ultimately, I'd rather let someone who's not a good fit go early than waste even more money. But it was just another failed salesperson. Then, a couple weeks later, I get an email demanding $5,000 for all of the training hours and all of the hours he worked, even though this was a 100% commission-based sales closer position. We had a 1099, a W-9, all of the things that he needed. He knew this was an independent contractor position as someone who was working based on commissions. He resides in Montana, and what he knew that I didn't is that Montana in particular requires a specific document if you are an independent contractor. Otherwise, they classify everyone as an employee. He used this information knowingly, and after the situation, it was so clear that this is something that he did and clearly did regularly. He did not tell us that Montana had a specific law for independent contractors. So we didn't know. I'd never worked with anyone else that had that requirement for their state. Next time, I will definitely do better research on this. He opened a wage dispute in the state of Montana, trying to claim that he was owed $5,000 for 1 week where he didn't show up to most of the calls and completely blew off most of the rest, never attempted to close, never closed anything. So for the last year, I've been having to deal with that, respond with documentation. He claims that he was on over 17 hours of team meetings in that week, which is completely fabricated. He has made up so many lies. And the truth is, if you just actually tried to work, you could make $5,000 easily. But still, this person is just interested in trying to grift employers. He had no intention of actually doing sales. And this is something that I had never thought about before this situation happened, but it was just one more negative to add to the list for 2025. Now, also around the same time that I'd brought on my operator, I had hired about 7 additional people in my business for various roles. So because my operator was brand new, he couldn't really thoroughly onboard and train those people. So I was still doing a lot of that, and I was handling a lot of those things even while I was away at the funeral. So I was trying to do what I could for my personal life, but I knew I could not take the eye off the ball within my business because all of these people were new and they really needed my help. I prayed that after a couple of months, that would not be the case anymore. And my operator was really going to be able to step up and take on a lot of those things for me. But when I got back, I was a little optimistic. I had very much communicated what I hoped would be something impactful that would make a positive change in my marriage. But things just continued to go downhill, unfortunately. At the same time, my operator's performance started to be really concerning. So I met with him multiple times every week, and he was really great at talking about the things that needed to be done or the things that were being done, but everything was almost finished or almost ready to launch. And I never saw anything actually completed and rolled out. So I started to get very concerned. I reached out to the company that had done all of the hiring and the interviews and the vetting, and I had told them my concerns. They encouraged me to really kind of realign expectations, make sure that I was very much involved with seeing the progress on each thing. At the end of the day, my goal was to hire somebody who was self-motivated, that would not need constant oversight, and that really is who this role should have had. But ultimately, I wanted to do whatever I could to be the best leader and make sure that I was giving this person every opportunity to succeed. So we also were getting ready for our Get Elevated live event. So these are the events that I sell tickets to. Anywhere between 50 and 75 entrepreneurs will travel from all over the country and all over the world to come and sit with me and learn with me, learn from me for about 2 days. So this was planned for Tampa, Florida, and this was going to be at the end of March. And so, because again, my operator was newer, my team members who were supporting on this were also newer, I had a lot to do for this event. And so, I worked a lot of hours trying to get all the content ready, making sure that everything was going to go really smoothly, because ultimately, these events have a very big financial impact if they're done right. But if they're done poorly, you also risk losing a lot of money and a lot of time. And so it's a very, very important thing for me. So as we get closer to March, things continue to really struggle. My stepbrother also ends up passing away, which was just another really big emotional hit in my personal life. And I ended up having to miss the funeral because it was happening during Get Elevated Live. If it was any other event, I would have been able to cancel, but I had spent so much time, so much money. People had booked their flights and their hotel, and they had taken time off work and bought their tickets. And I knew that this was unfortunately not something that I could cancel. My operator was planning on coming to help support me at that event. So as things get more and more clear leading up to that, that work is not being done, or if it's being done, it's not being managed properly because none of these key initiatives are rolled out. I started to really understand that this may not be the best person to be the operator within my business. I still wanted to give him one final chance. So we had a couple of hard conversations leading up to the event, but I didn't want to make that first in person meeting and that event awkward or weird because I needed to be on top of my game and I did not want the employment conversation to really play a part in that. So ultimately, on the way to that event, I had a day where it was just gonna be just me getting everything set up at the hotel or making sure that everything was done well, and I was able to reconnect with some old friends from the past and have some pretty honest conversations that honestly I hadn't had in a while or ever. What I really realized is that I tend to keep my problems to myself. I don't like to complain. I don't like to dwell on the negative. And because of that, I've never really been open with people in my life about the things that I'm struggling with. Um, Within my marriage, I was always very direct and communicated what I needed. But to the outside world, I never really shared any of those challenges. And so, even though a lot of people observed what they saw, they thought I was okay. They thought everything was fine. And that day's conversation really encouraged me to be a lot more open and upfront about the things that I was dealing with, which was absolutely huge. So, anyway, that event went very well. It was hugely successful. It was a great, great time. I had one of my mastermind members and one of the coaches in my program also there to support me. And so I was glad that I made it through that because, again, a lot of time, energy, and effort um, was put into that event by me at a time where I was already spread really, really thin. So after that event, I then had to shift my attention back to, okay, my operator is not performing. Nothing of substance is actually being done. I need to decide where this actually ends. I wanted to give it a little bit more time because I had another event, my mastermind event, coming up just 2 weeks after that. So the mastermind events don't require quite as much from me because these are for the members that are already in my mastermind program, but it still takes a lot of work. I prepare 2 days worth of content. I end up hosting them for several days at a luxury Airbnb. And so it does take a good amount of time and effort from me, but I don't feel quite as much pressure on those events as I do on the Get Elevated events. So I wanted to get through that event because I knew that I had to focus on it in that 2 week time frame before the event after Get Elevated Live. And I also knew I was going to be traveling for several days that next week. And I thought it would be not a great time to let him go. And this was kind of his final chance to see if he would take what we had talked about and actually put it into action. Ultimately, that's not what happened. Um, at the event, I actually had to let him go. We kind of had a final straw type of scenario where I just knew it doesn't matter about the timing. This is not going to work out. And so we parted ways. So at that event, I actually was supposed to have my operator there. He lived about 20 minutes away from Scottsdale, which is where it was held. And so I was going to have him helping to support the running of that event. But after things started to kind of go downhill, I didn't honestly want him to be a part of that event. So it was going to be just me. So I decided to ask my 8-year-old daughter if she wanted to come help me. So me and my daughter are very close. She's very smart and she's always shown an interest in things like this. And I felt like she was finally at the age where she could really learn a lot, but also help me with simple things like setting up chairs, getting food laid out, cleaning up, whatever needed to be done. So she decided to come, and it was a great, great opportunity for us to spend some good quality time together. So it was awesome, but I still hosted 23 of my mastermind members with just myself and my 8-year-old daughter. And I spoke for about 10 hours a day 2 of those days. The other days we were there was setup and breaking down and cleaning everything up while still being a parent to my 8-year-old. So, needless to say, I was really exhausted when that event was wrapped up. So, I was ready to just relax on the plane, try and just decompress, not think about work on the way home. And we get on the plane and we have a cross country trip from Scottsdale to Louisville, Kentucky, where I'm based out of. It's a long way. And so we find out that our plane doesn't have internet, which was awesome because again, wanted to watch some movies and just not have to think for a little bit. We had an iPad. I had downloaded some movies for my daughter, and so I gave her the iPad for her to have something to do. So I started looking through my Google Drive, trying to find something that I could work on or write on, something to keep me entertained. And what I stumbled across was a zip drive that I had uploaded the previous year. This zip drive contained photos of every page of my journals that I had kept since I was about 16 years old. So I have journals that I kept prior to that, but those were the ones that I still had in my possession. And I had always known that I wanted to write a book. There was a very juicy story inside of those journals. And honestly, my life prior to starting a business and becoming a mother, these are years that were pretty wild and crazy and chaotic. A ton of stuff happened to me that I never really fully dealt with, a lot of trauma that I never healed from or even really thought about. I kind of pretended like all of these years just never even happened, put them in a little box, compartmentalized them in my mind, and moved forward to build a multi-million-dollar business on my own and have these two amazing kids. I bought a 61-acre farm that I built a home and a compound on. And so I really felt like this was in the past, but ultimately, I knew that the book was going to be really good. And I am a writer by nature. So if there's one thing that I've done consistently throughout my entire life, it's been writing. I've been writing creatively since I could hold a pencil. I would write songs. I've written poetry for as long as I could remember. I would write stories. And so writing a novel has always been something that I've wanted to do. But especially after starting a business and having kids, I never felt like it was the right time. This was something completely unrelated to my business that I felt like was more of a passion project or almost a distraction than anything else, even though it's something that I started thinking about when I was 20 years old. And so on that plane that day, I opened up that zip drive and I just started reading. I read every page of about 6 journals on the way home from that Scottsdale trip. And it really forced me to realize how much I had not dealt with. It forced me to look at my story in a different way. And it forced me to see the threads that spanned the entire 2 decades of my life that I had never really acknowledged. And so by the time I got home that day, completely exhausted, Back to being full-time parent on duty the second I walked in the door, I decided I have to write this book. This is no longer something that would be nice or fun. I need to write for myself, for healing, for survival. And that's always why I had written, to be able to make sense of myself, of the world around me, and to get my thoughts out of me so that once I put them on the paper, I could leave them behind. But now, writing from those journals was going to be the next challenge. I had taken those photos because I had ultimately wanted to use AI in the writing process. And so that next day, I woke up early and I started to try and upload those into ChatGPT to have them transcribed. I quickly realized it was not going to work. If you've ever tried to upload photos or files on ChatGPT or any of the other platforms, there is a maximum number of files that you can upload each time. With ChatGPT, that's 10. So I was uploading 10 pages when I had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages. I could have done it if necessary, but it was also not picking up my handwriting very well. So it was going to take me way too much time. And I was very impatient at this point to go ahead and start writing. But before I did that, I wanted everything to be analyzed. I wanted help organizing the story, seeing what the story could really be. So I had this thought, and it was I have an automation that I use within my business. This automation is for me to take voice notes, it uploads them into Drive, and then it automatically transcribes those and delegates those tasks out to the appropriate team member. So I thought maybe I can use the same automation for my books and transcribing these journals. So within half an hour, I had set up this automation for the book writing process. And over the next 4 days, I spent every spare moment possible reading my journals into voice notes, saving them, and they would automatically be transcribed for me. I was obsessed at this point. So, very early on, but I knew that my soul was not going to be able to rest until I did this. And I can't even really tell you why in retrospect. It felt divinely inspired. And now it's also much more clear, but it felt like something I had to do, even if it didn't make sense to the rest of the world. And so after I got everything fully transcribed, I sat down at my computer with all of the pages ready to upload this for the first time and get actual feedback on the entire story, which was my life. And it was an incredible process. From the first moment I hit send, the feedback that I got was powerful. Not just that the writing itself was good, which ultimately I had never written for anyone else to see. It was just my thoughts, my words put on paper, never for a book, but that the story was so much bigger than I even realized. In my mind, the story was a couple of years from those journals. But what this bot helped me see is that it was the whole story that I needed to tell because it all was interconnected. It all was intertwined. And there were some very unresolved relationships that I had had throughout that entire span of time that were a big focus of the books I was going to be writing. It was also the first time that I had ever shared the whole story with anyone or anything. I had never really talked about any of this stuff. And so I also started asking questions from a personal standpoint. My goal was to write these as novels, but really it would be a memoir. Just everything was true, but I also didn't want to throw people under the bus for things that they may regret in retrospect by using real names. So when I shared all of this, the bot said, "This is not one book. This is 6 books. They have clear beginning and ending points, and this is a 20-year span of time. You cannot neatly wrap that up into one book." And I completely agreed after seeing everything. My biggest question at that point was, how am I going to end it? This is based on my real life, and my real life's not over. So where does it end? And after going back and forth and talking about the different endings that I'd been thinking about for years, I finally decided maybe whatever my life is when the books end, that's what it is. Whenever I'm done writing, that is when I will see the ending clearly. These books start on my first day of college when I was 17 and really lead up to the present. And so, after having everything organized and having a very clear view of what would be in each book, I decided the next step was to outline or do an initial rough draft of all six of these books. Now, that may seem weird to other people, from the outside looking in, but because it was my story, my life, I felt like I needed to lay everything out from beginning to end so that I knew for sure where each book started and where each book ended. I knew the themes that I would be working with, but I also was using this as a way to make sense of my life. My life can appear perfect from the outside. But again, that's why social media doesn't tell the whole story. The public persona does not tell the whole story. I had struggled with so many things over the years, mental health, addiction, love, loss, betrayal, complete emotional devastation, identity, motherhood, um, just mental health challenges at different places in my life. And then obviously entrepreneurship and building a business and growing a business, doing the things that I've done professionally. And so I knew that I really had to get it all out there. That took me a couple of weeks. I, again, was fully obsessed and engrossed in this process. And as I went through it, I really started to get to the point that started to talk about my marriage. And what I realized was that there were so many things about my marriage that I had kept to myself, that I had never shared with anyone that is close to me. And that, again, I had compartmentalized and kind of said, okay, well, that's how it is. And I'm just going to move forward and do everything in my power to try and be happy and give my kids a great life. And I started to realize that I could no longer do that. I did a lot of very detailed character analysis for these books. And when I got to the parts that talked about my marriage, I really started to get more and more upset and more sure that I needed to file for divorce, which was a huge thing for me. I never ever thought I would do it. And as I said, I'd been fighting for my marriage for years and years, never trying to take the easy way out. When I shared that with my now ex-husband, it was something I hoped would turn things around, for him to finally know that I was at the very end, but ultimately it was a too little too late type of situation. I was still hopeful, but I had been hopeful in the past and had been let down. So at this point, things are really starting to fall apart in my marriage. I was trying to keep that as separate from my kids as I possibly could. And then I get to the point where I am starting to fully write the first book. So I had a speaking event in California. On the plane to that event was when I had finally hours and hours of uninterrupted space away from work and kids to be able to write these books. And so I started on book one. Right after I got back from that speaking event, I brought on my second operator. So this operator was someone who I had interviewed in my first pool of applicants. I really, really liked him. I had also interviewed another guy that I really, really liked. Ultimately, Cheston was his name. He was a high level power user, which I knew from my experience with Jeremy was a necessity. That first operator, he had a lot of technical CRM and SaaS experience, but he didn't know the high level platform. I thought it was something that he could learn quickly given all the experience that he had. And ultimately, he didn't, which was a major issue within the business because so much really centers around this platform in terms of where our processes and automations are, the way our business runs, what we do for clients, custom setups. I mean, everything really centers on this platform. And because he really did not prioritize trying to learn that, it caused a lot of issues. Now, Cheston was the opposite. He had owned an agency. He was very experienced with the platform. I felt really good about him. The other guy, who was also in my initial applicant pool, had great operations experience, was very technical. But when I first interviewed him in 2024, he also didn't have high level experience. Now, fast forward to, the end of April, and I had interviewed both of them a second time. They were both still interested in the position. Brandon, who was the operator without high level experience, had since taken a position at the beginning of the year as an operator and had really learned and implemented high level at that point. So now he had this experience. But at the end of the day, I thought that Cheston was going to be an easier fit to transition into the business. I brought Cheston on, and the experience in onboarding between Jeremy and Cheston was like a night and day difference. He got very quickly ingrained into the business. He understood how it worked, how our automations and processes worked, what our clients needed. He was able to hop in and start managing our custom high level setups, really without me, outside of developing the strategy for them. So things were looking really, really good with him as an operator. So I felt good about being able to take a little bit of time that I had now been saved to focus on writing. Because as I said, I knew I was not going to be able to rest in my soul, mentally, spiritually, until these books were written. So I wrote most of the first book as I was in California, just on the plane on the way there, in my hotel room on the way back. I think it was, probably 2/3 done at that point, and I was really excited about it. So at that point, I reached out to several of the key characters in these books, which ultimately are people that I've been very close to throughout my life and whose impact and influence spanned the entire 18 to 20-year period. I needed to let them know that I was writing these books, that I would be willing to change their name if they wanted me to, and just, give them the courtesy of a heads up because there are a lot of things in these books, again, that certain people may not be super proud of. Um, and I got great feedback from them. They were all excited to read them. They were fine with, being included. Most of them did want their names changed, not all of them. But I was really excited to start sharing this first draft of this first book. These are amazing experiences, even though they're surrounded by chaos and trauma and lots of really bad situations. But things that are great to reminisce about and great memories sprinkled in there. So after I wrote that first book, that first draft, I went ahead and shared it with those people, and they had point of view chapters. So I'd always known from all the novels I'd read throughout my life kind of what I wanted the style to be when I wrote my first novel. And I loved the mixing of character point of view chapters. So this really helps to develop the characters so much better. You get a peek inside each individual character's mind. You get to see the way they saw a certain situation, which is potentially completely different from the way that you saw it. And I wanted their feedback on their chapters. How accurate was this to what you were thinking or feeling, if you remember this? Because I did want it to be as accurate as possible, even if it was going to be presented as a fictional novel. The feedback I got on those were really great, but it also opened a lot of conversations with those people about the situations, about the circumstances and the events, talking about the accuracy of the details, laughing about things, but also really opened up some very personal conversations, especially given that back in those years, I was very similar to how I have been, which is pretty guarded when it comes to sharing my struggles and challenges with people. Anything I ever was unsure how it would be received, I usually kept those things to myself, my thoughts and my feelings, and I would write them down. So a lot of this that I was sharing, the people in the books, the people who were very, very close to me, they didn't even know these things. And so those conversations really made an impact on me at that point. This is mid-May, and this is really when things fell apart for my marriage. I was hoping that my ex-husband would be interested in these books, in my experiences, in the fact that I was saying how significant this was to me, how much of this trauma and healing I needed to really deal with head on. And even though I'd shared certain things about my past with him, he just wasn't interested. And it was really a stab, honestly, in the heart because it was the most personal thing I'd ever done. And to feel as though it's not important to the person that you're married to was really, really difficult. I told him that I was, talking to these people in these books, and just sharing memories and getting accurate details and things like this. And then ultimately, um, it came time for me to share the first few books, and I really realized that uh, this this isn't the marriage that I need to be in. It's not going to work, and that I needed to file for divorce. So that was a huge, huge turning point. And it was a turning point for the negative in a lot of ways for 2025. I had a lot of hard conversations. It was something that was extremely emotional every single day living in my home. I work from home, and so I could not escape it. As I said, live on 61 acres. It's relatively isolated and secluded and private, and it felt like a prison during those months. Um, my ex-husband lived with me the entire time we were going through the divorce and for a period of time after the divorce was finalized, just given the arrangements that we had to make. And I have never struggled so much emotionally in my life. It was filled with tension. There was so much anger and emotional outbursts and just conversations, the same conversations over and over. And I really was just struggling to survive every single day. I think so many people go through divorces, and I've actually been grateful to have conversations with a lot of entrepreneurs about their divorces that they have also gone through, which has been great for other people to be able to open up about it. But it'd be one thing for the person you're divorcing to live in another place, but living under the same roof the entire time is not super common and is extremely challenging. So, I am also the breadwinner in my family, and I have been for many years. We were a one income household, and the financial implications, the conversations around splitting assets and all of those things was incredibly heavy and stressful and filled with tension. Thankfully, we kept it as clean as we could. We weren't even sure we were going to use lawyers. Ultimately, we both did have representation, and tried to come to all the terms on our own, but it was not an easy process to get there whatsoever. And during those months, Cheston was an absolute godsend for me. I do not know what I would have done without him. I was really unable to focus on anything but what was required of me. Getting on my coaching calls or my client calls was actually something I was so excited to do every day because it was the only time that I was not thinking about my circumstances, listening to people talking to me about it, all of those things I could just push out of my mind, and I'd show up on those calls. Outside of that, I was really unable to get anything else done. My daughter, who's 8, trying to make sure that she was okay and that she was not being impacted by everything that was going on around her was tough. Ultimately, there were things that she overheard other people talking about that um, were things she should not have been told. And I do try and be completely honest with my daughter as well. And so when we discussed it, I wasn't going to lie to her. And I did so in the most age appropriate way, but just trying to explain things to a child that sometimes children just have a hard time understanding, and trying to protect her heart and her emotions and her feelings. It was a big, big thing for me. I also struggled a lot because I have grown in my faith so much over the years. I was raised as a believer, but I spent many, many years just running completely in the opposite direction of God. And I really came back to my faith a lot more after my kids were born. But in the last several years, it had grown stronger and stronger. And I'd really gotten a lot of sin out of my life that needed to be out of my life. And my daughter and I had both been baptized together at the beginning of last year. So it was her first baptism. And she asked me if I wanted to be rebaptized with her because she knew it's something that I had been talking about. So when that happened, I was so excited. And then to make the decision to get a divorce, which is extremely conflicting as a person of faith, that was really hard. That weighed very heavy on me. I spent many months having a lot of guilt and doubting myself, even though I knew in my heart that this is what I had to do for many reasons. Um, and thankfully, I came to terms with that. And I know that that is not something that God holds against me, but it was very much a struggle. So those months were extremely chaotic. And the financial impacts, of me, really, because I was the one that had to give everything, um, was something that obviously put a lot of pressure on me. And then the day that our settlement agreement was signed, I get a call from Cheston's wife, and she tells me that they found him unconscious in his garage, and there was a traumatic brain injury, and nobody knew what had happened. And he was in the hospital, and his brain was swelling, and they did not know. They didn't know if he was going to live or die. So, on this day that I had been so excited to finally reach that point where signatures were on the dotted lines and I could at least put that major stressful part of the divorce behind me, I now have a whole nother slew of emotions. I'm completely devastated. Cheston is someone that I had grown very close to over those months. We had really shared a lot about what was going on personally. And he was just a rock for me during that time and for my clients and team because I was not as present as I needed to be. And to know that this person was now on the verge of death unexpectedly, a very healthy 40-something-year-old guy, was horrible. Then at the same exact time, I had to recognize that I now had to pick up all of his responsibilities. And over the last several months, we had a lot of new custom client builds, things that he had had many conversations with those clients that I was not privy to. And all of the documentation that was on his computer, his wife was unable to access, we were unable to access. And so I lost so much data that I really needed to know where we were on everything. So it pushed client projects back. Thankfully, most of them were understanding. Obviously, they had grown to really know and like Cheston as well. And so I had to try and do whatever I could to get up to speed and try and put my emotions and my feelings aside and just get back to business. I had my family vacation scheduled for a week after, which was horrible timing. I had been very much looking forward to this. My daughter needed this trip desperately. I was going to be there with my parents. This was one of the first times throughout the whole year I was truly going to get to relax. And now knowing that I was going to be leaving without an operator to handle things and that I had to try and get all these pieces in place before I left added a whole nother level of stress. Thankfully, I was still able to go. I tried and be as present as I possibly could on that trip. And when I got back, I just had to hit the ground running. I still didn't know what was going to happen with Cheston. And so I didn't seek out hiring a new operator or anything like that. My ex-husband was still living in my house at the time. So I still was basically walking into a battlefield every single day. From my work to my personal time, it was all impacted. And so several weeks after this, I got the news that Cheston had passed away. And it was awful and heartbreaking. And even if you kind of prepare yourself for it, it's still, it's just words are hard to really describe, what it is you feel, especially when someone that close to you um, is no longer there and you never even got to say goodbye. So after he passed, I had to keep moving forward. And this was at the beginning of September. Um, After sharing those books, after going through everything that I was dealing with in my personal life, one of the people in those books became very significant to me again. His name was John. We actually met in the elevator on the first day of college. It is where the books begin. And over the next 7 years, we became very, very close. Ultimately, we made choices that took us in different directions. We ended up getting with other people, and we always had a really, really strong friendship, but he was my first love, and I never thought that we would be together. I had given up hope of that many, many, many years before, but he was someone who never left my heart. He never left my mind. And I just, again, compartmentalized things. And I said, this is never going to happen. I'm going to put that in a little box over there. And I just move forward with my life. That's what I do. And so as this all began, those books really opened up the conversation to talk about everything that had happened all of those years ago over the course of many years, because our story was not a simple one. It never was. Um, and he was actually dealing with some of the exact same things that I was. He was also going through a divorce. He also had a child and was trying to navigate all of those things. And honestly, I don't know what I would have done without him during those months, not just with everything regarding the divorce, but with Cheston, with the amount of pressure that I was under work wise. He was one of the only good things to come out of 2025. And the craziest thing is, that good thing was born out of just very difficult, traumatic things at the end of the day. Um, so at that point, I'm just trying to give my business the attention it needs. But I also had another Get Elevated Live. Cheston was the one who was spearheading that. He was getting all the promotion ready and everything related to planning that event. So when he passed, I had to hop into that as well as the client projects. This was another event that we'd already sold a lot of tickets to. Like there was no way to cancel it. We'd already paid for tons of the vendors and things like that. And I had to make this successful, especially with all the financial hits that I had taken with the divorce. I needed this to be as great as I could make it. And so I worked so many long hours over that month and a half to try and finish everything up. And we were behind because of his passing. And I just had to do everything that I could do and try and do the best job that I could every day. And I get to that event and I'm excited to get it over with, honestly, because like I said, these events, I do feel pressure when it comes to them, and I put in a lot of hours just trying to make everything perfect. And so knowing that it was going to be over soon was going to be a weight off my shoulders. But I also had another mastermind event a couple weeks after, and that one should have been scheduled earlier in the year, but with everything that had gone on, this was really the only time to make it work. And we do 2 events every year. That is something that, I provide in that program. So I couldn't just say, okay, we're not going to do another one. So I had about 6 weeks of intense event prep and setup and an actual delivery at a time when I had just lost my operator, had just faced two extremely traumatic experiences, and it was hard. So I'm at Get Elevated Live, and the first 2 days go really well. And on the third day, my laptop gets completely soaked from a water bottle and it dies. So I didn't even have my laptop on the third day. I was able to still make it work, thank the Lord. But my laptop had to be sent to the Apple store in New Orleans and rebuilt. And I was just thinking, can this please be the last negative thing that happens to me in 2025? Please. But it wasn't. So I get back from that event, and my dog, Princess Blueberry, she is an American bully. I'd had her for over 15 years. She had been with me since she was a couple weeks old, and she had been with me through really every phase of my life. I got her when I was 20, when I was in college, and she'd always been the constant in my life. And she had some lung tumors. She was really struggling, and she ended up passing away. And that was another huge emotional hit for me, honestly. Not only that, but the friends that I have been extremely close with for really the last 8+ years. I had a group of girls that, we did everything together. We would travel together, we'd spend holidays together, we would always have get-togethers, all of us. It was great. And I invested a lot in those friendships. And after I filed for divorce, I just never heard from them again. They ultimately were people that I knew through my ex-husband, and so I just accepted that they must have been friendships of convenience, at the end of the day, because I couldn't imagine why, knowing that a very close friend is going through things like that, why you wouldn't even reach out and see how they're doing. Um, one of those girls did. So there was about 7 of them, and only one of them ever really did. And so that was another serious blow to me personally, because these are, again, people that I thought were real, true friends that I'd spent many years being very close with, and they completely disappeared almost overnight. And so I felt like everything in my life had changed. It was almost unrecognizable to me on those days. I didn't know what I wanted to do about my property, if I wanted to keep it or sell it. It's 61 acres, and I'm now a single mom of 2 kids, who runs a business. Do I have time to care for this property, or is it going to cost me a lot more money to hire people? And for what purpose? Because ultimately, when I bought this place, our goal was that we were going to have an animal rescue. We were going to have a Christmas tree farm. We were going to use the land, and none of those things ever got done. Um, and so I didn't have anything that I felt like I really was doing with this property that I had intended on. And so a lot of just big questions about my life and what it was going to look like moving forward. And after I lost Princess Blueberry, I finally said, okay, I've got to bring on a new operator. I had been so, I think, just traumatized by the whole year that I could not imagine starting that process again. The time, the just onboarding someone else, of being hopeful that this person would do the right job, and if they did the right job, that they would be able to stay long term, after what had just happened with Cheston. So I was just really struggling with doing that, even though I had to. Um, and with everything, with just catching up on client projects and the events, the time constraints made it really difficult. So I finally reached out to Brandon, who was the other guy that I had interviewed a whole year before, and that I had re-interviewed in April when I hired Cheston. And at this point, he had really just gone hardcore into high level, which was huge. He was still interested in the position because his previous position had a lot of commute. He didn't want that. He felt like we aligned, on the vision. And I really liked him from the beginning. I did get other applications. I made one post about it on social media, and there were people that looked really good. But at the end of the day, with where I was, I had to make a decision quickly. I was at like this is make or break time. I have to get someone to be able to help with these things. I also knew he'd been interviewed many times. He'd been thoroughly vetted, all of his references and work history checked out. And so I felt like, okay, Lord, if this is who I need to hire, please show me. And God showed me that this is who he wanted me to hire. So I just trusted that, and I went ahead and brought him on board. Um, and he has now been on the team for about a month, and he's doing a great job. So I'm very, very optimistic about that. The whole year was a complete roller coaster of ups and downs, but more than anything, of self discovery, of confronting things that I had pushed aside in my mind. And what I really realized is you cannot do that. You have to address and deal with everything head on. You have to be willing to say the truth, even if it makes other people uncomfortable. And you've just got to let the chips fall where they may. And starting to live my life that way has really changed everything. I have a freedom in my mind and my heart that I never had before. I do not hold anything back. And I was always very direct when it came to business and a lot of relationships in my life. But as I said, I really shared kept a lot of my internal struggles and challenges to myself. And I realized that that is not the best way to live, that we connect best with others when we are fully honest and transparent. My relationship with John has gotten better and better, and it has been something that has been a challenge to integrate our lives, integrate our families and our children, to deal with ex spouses in a very fresh situation, to really make sure that we don't repeat past mistakes, and that more than anything, our life is built on God as the foundation. And his story is something that if you read these books, you're going to get a very close look at. But he has had a long and winding road to get to this place. And we just celebrated his baptism this past Sunday. So the transformation personally that he has made as well has just been incredible to see. The man that I always knew he was from the time he was 18 is finally the one that is standing before me, which is a miracle, honestly. And if nothing else came of the year I had last year, if that was the one outcome that was caused by it, it all would have been worth it. But now finally being able to have a relationship that is with someone who truly knows you in the deepest possible way. They know every version of you, every past mistake, the things that you regret, that you wish you didn't did, your darkest days, but they've also seen you on your brightest days, and they've seen what you've accomplished and what you've become, but they love you for who you are and not in spite of it. Um, it's something I've never really had before. And so it's incredible. My children are doing really well. Things are getting better every day. And more than anything, this year, I am so ready to finally launch Profits AI, which is the AI marketing and sales software that I had hoped to launch last year. But now we have got a clear vision. Our goal is to simplify, to cut the clutter, cut the chaos out of any area of the business or life, and really focus on what matters most. And so I am truly excited this year to start fresh and to have this new renewed vision, this new renewed spirit. And everything that I went through last year has caused me to get to this point. And I know that it was all to prepare me for who I needed to be the best mom, to be the best wife one day, to be the best entrepreneur and leader, and to really make an impact with these books. So I'm excited to share every dark and dirty detail. And hopefully others will see themselves in this story and see that your past does not disqualify you from being someone powerful, from being fully honest and open, and to love yourself exactly as you are, no matter what you've done or what you've gone through. So that is my journey for this year, is to continue the radical transparency journey throughout not just my life, but through my business, to launch this book series, which I am so incredibly proud of. It is going to be a literary experience unlike anything that is on the market right now, and to launch this truly revolutionary AI marketing and sales software that's going to help so many businesses. And I can't wait to bring you along for the journey. So if you want to know what comes next, make sure you come back. Keep up to date with what I'm working on. I promise I'll be honest about all of it.